Hey everyone, and welcome back to Chat Sematary. Today, Murjani Rawls and I are going to be talking about The Running Man. For the second time, I might add. I was unprepared the first time we did this, so I asked Murjani if we could redo it, and he kindly said yes. Murjani, how are you doing today?
I'm good. A little bit under the weather, but we're hanging in there.
It feels like it is that time of year where most people are at least a little under the weather.
Yeah, I usually, thankfully, only get sick like once or twice a year, and usually when it gets really, really cold, that's when I get a head cold.
Yeah, well, we'll keep this brief then. So we're going to jump right in. The first thing I want to talk about is casting, because this movie has a pretty stacked cast, and I think some of it works. I think some of it doesn't. So we're going to start off with some of the supporting characters, because I think Josh Brolin and Coleman Domingo really work well in their respective roles. I think Coleman looks like he is having the time of his life, just getting to dress up and act a little crazy and be like this quirky game show host. I think he works very, very well in that role. I think Michael Cera is fun as sort of the wild card in the second half of the movie. How did you feel generally about the supporting cast in this?
I feel as though like Coleman Domingo really kind of knew the assignment, as well as like really leaning into like the camp of The Running Man.
Mm-hmm.
He was definitely, as Bobby is like the host, very compelling and kind of like being sort of the narrator as we go through all the things that Ben Richards is going through. Josh Brolin as Dan Killian. He's really good as kind of like this like evil producer with like it seemed like he had like veneers in.
Yeah.
With evil grin. Yeah, like you said, like Michael Cera as like the rebel that we get to see for like 10 minutes. Like he played well. We didn't really get to see Jamie Lawson as Sheila that much. We only really saw her in the beginning. That's kind of how I felt about Katie O'Brien as Jenny. Like,
yeah,
you see her like in the initial thing, and then
her death scene.
You kind of hear about her. Yeah, her death scene, and then that's it. I think that is kind of a complaint about Katie O'Brien and her supporting roles, is that you don't see enough of her. Mission Impossible.
Yeah.
Or Christy. You know, she's great in Love with Eyes Bleeding. I just wish that she had more time. Lee Pace, I mean, he's under a mask for most of the film.
Yeah, 95% of this movie, even though I understand like his face is all scarred and everything, but to keep Lee Pace under a mask for that long, when he's someone who is just so good on camera, but it feels diminished when you can't see his face when he is acting. Like, it was a choice that I understand given the character, but one I didn't like.
Yeah, it's just weird to have like somebody like Lee Pace in that role. Yeah, Amelia Jones is fine as Amelia.
Yeah.
As far as the supporting cast goes, I think that Edgar pretty much nailed it. It's just that wanting to see more of like different characters. You know, even Daniel Ezra as Bradley.
Yeah, I liked him.
Yeah, I liked him too. It's just that like you get a sense of the story, and it's just like Ben has to kind of move on, you know?
Yeah, I think that is sort of the downside to the game in general, is that he can't obviously stay in one place for too long. So all of these supporting characters have such limited screen time, and it's all coming in like one chunk. Like you said with Michael Cera, we get him for like a straight 10 minutes just being batty. And it's just because of how many different like action pieces and everything, it's just a lot happening all at once. And then there's like these different tonal shifts throughout the movie because of it. But that leads us to talking about Glenn Powell as the star of this, who, as you know, and as some listeners of this podcast probably know, I really enjoy Glenn Powell. I don't think this is the right kind of role for him, because while he can do the action scenes and the disguises, Glenn Powell loves a disguise. He loves to play characters who wear disguises. And I think he works well with that part of the movie, but the part where he has to be like this uber angry guy just doesn't fully work for me.
That was kind of one of the issues that I had within the plot and the storytelling with this story as a whole, is that there's so much tell as far as Ben being the angriest guy in the world. There's so much like emphasis on Glenn being this angry guy, and you kind of do see it in the beginning. Like, obviously, like, you live in a world where you have to go to the black market to get, you know, like flu stuff and medicines, and he can't get that, you know, like his wife has to work at this like sleazy bar as a bartender. He gets fired and excommunicated for doing the right thing, for saving somebody, working for the union, you know, like he has every right to be angry at this world, as does everybody who's living in it. But Glenn is so like, he's so adept to be charming. Like they even do the hitman thing in this film with like the disguises and stuff like that. Like he's so like charming, as in like anyone but you. It's just that like when you need him to be the Richards Lives rebel character, it doesn't feel as right. He's not like the Arnold Schwarzenegger guy where like he is kind of like 80s cheesy, but like he is an action star. Like when he makes that like corny speech, like when he to Killian, when he's speaking into the camera, like where he's like, I'm gonna, you know, take my fist and rub it down your stomach. Like you believe him. And then like when like with Glenn, it's just like, I know there's like this push for him to be a leading man, and I think that in some instances he is. I know Twister's he's kind of a supporting character or co-lead, if you want to say that. Top Gun, he's definitely like a Tom Cruise is kind of elevate this guy. I'm looking forward to How to Make a Killing.
Same.
But I don't know, like in this film, it's just that like you mentioned tone. Sometimes it's serious, and then sometimes it's kind of goofy. It just doesn't work to Glenn's strengths.
Yeah, I feel like this movie needed to either be like all serious or all camp. Like the Arnold Running Man is quite campy, you know, throughout the whole thing. You got like the spandex suits and, you know, you have all of these very 80s tropes about that movie that I think make it sort of like this cult favorite, even though it doesn't fully follow the storyline quite the same way. And I wanted to talk about the action sequences in this too, because like we were saying earlier, with him on the move, you obviously can't spend too much time in any one place, but you have, by my count, like 4 or 5 big action sequences. You have the sequence at the YVA, which is like that hotel hostel that he's staying at. And you have the car chase on the way to Derry, which is where Michael Cera's character Elton lives. You have the whole big sequence at the house, and then you have the big plane finale sequence. For you, did that feel like too many big action sequences?
I think about like the 80s, adaptation of film, and it's very confined. Like you have like the one in the beginning where Arnold Schwarzenegger's like Richards is kind of like, you know, like this guy, and like they come get him and stuff like that. And then most of the film is in this contained setting where him and the other contestants have to fight through like Dynamo, the guy who sinks and like has like that light up suit. One of my favorite characters ever. Here, I mean, like, if you look at, like, Edgar Wright films, right? Scott Pilgrim versus the World has, like, really good action. It has really good comic action. Shaun of the Dead has some good action, too. I mean, I don't know. It's just, I think the problem with me, it's not necessarily the action, because I think that the best action sequence in this film is probably the one where he's at the hostel. That's kind of the bombastic one. The car chase one felt like a very kind of generic, or we got to get away from people. The jet one also, it was kind of cool, but it was also like, it's just that to me, they weren't very spectacular. I think I was more compelled about the world and like what the people were living in, and kind of about the game, where like it's almost as if like the audience is also as bad.
Yeah.
Because you essentially have to snitch for money more so than like the action.
Yeah. And I think with this being a slightly over 2-hour movie, you kind of do need those big action sequences to keep the movie moving forward. But at the same time, I just, like you, I didn't find them all that compelling. Obviously, the big sequence at Elton's house is fun, but you can tell that it's really just him wanting to do it for him. It's not really something that needed to happen for the story in the same way that the Hostel one is.
Yeah, I think that, like I said, like the difference between the 80s film and this film is that Ben Richards is just running away from the hunters. Like he's not like going up against this like Mortal Kombat pyramid of gladiator guys like in the 80s. Like he's just running away, like trying to sidestep these 500s all the time, as well as like the people who are like trying to rat out on where his whereabouts are. With that story, you kind of have to always find an interesting way in which to put landmines in front of Ben to make it like more enticing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Edgar tried to do that in the story when he like, visits like Elton, and then he, visits Bradley, and then, like it just feels like stops on the way rather than, I think in the beginning I got the sense that Ben Richards was like, all right, he's in danger. You know what I mean? Like he gets that head start, but he's in danger. I think there were periods, especially in the second act, where I was like, oh, well, he could just kind of go here or like go somewhere and just hide out for a couple of days. Like he did that in the hotel room. It almost feels like the movie's momentum kind of starts and stops a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's just like, all right, well, we got to up the danger up. So like this instance where like somebody will find where Ben is, that's what we'll do. Or Elton will like out where Ben is because he wants to go out in a blaze of glory. I just wish that there were more kind of suspense, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think one of the things we definitely have to talk about with this movie too is the budget, because we know that these big action sequences are what probably drove a lot of the budget to be where it was. Obviously, you have your usual things like paying the cast, and, like we said, this is pretty stacked cast. But the budget for this movie was $110 million. It made significantly less than that at the box office. It made $68.6 million. That's not good. And I know you and I separately outside of this podcast have had like quite a few conversations about movie budgets in general and how they've really ballooned. And I think it's one of those things where they clearly wanted this to be a big hit. They went out, they got Glenn Powell, who's like Hollywood's rising star right now, and got all of these great supporting actors. But it just didn't come together in the way I think they thought it was going to.
I think that movie budgets in general are just kind of out of control, where...
Agreed.
Like you have like movie budgets ranging from like 100 million and 200 million, where there's so much pressure on them to make so much more money that like they could just never live up to that. And then you have less money, like I go back to a movie like Beau is Afraid, which I'm glad A24 like did a swing on, but I think the budget for that movie was either 35 or 50 million. Like it's just like, wow, like that's a lot of money, Here, it's not only I feel like it's not only kind of like the budget for this, because you would think that, it coming out like around Thanksgiving or November, like it would be a big hit. But I think it's because when I was watching this movie, I was thinking about like The Long Walk, right? Which came out like 2 months before, which I felt was more of a more brutal, more kind of dour and bleak adaptation of a dystopian film that Stephen King made, and this one is just kind of like saying a lot of things without saying it. Like, we have watched Squid Game. We've watched like these films. We've even seen things like Squid Game even turned into their own reality TV series. Like we've seen like a lot of dystopia. We are living in a world where like you essentially are being surveilled all the time with, cameras and like people taping you. And, like you have, I think in the beginning of The Running Man, they had like the man in the hamster wheel, right? He has the heart attack.
Yeah.
You look at that and you're like, well, that, we'll probably have, or we're close to having like a reality show like that. I just think that like it coming off the heels of such a well-received adaptation that kind of does the same thing didn't really help it as well either, where it's kind of running its fingers through the hair of like society sucks. Nobody has any money because the government and the elite are taking it all.
Right.
There's like neighborhoods that the rich live in and have access to, and there are neighborhoods that the poor live in that like are destitute and put off to the side. And I feel like this movie does speak about that, but I think if you're making a film like this, you have to say something a little bit more, because like when reality starts to meld with fiction, like it may not just be enough to say like, hey, like look at this and look at this, like Stephen King called it,
Yeah, and I get that this is a dystopic world, but I do think that a lot of big blockbuster movies like this are all kind of starting to look the same to me. So it's not going to be full of color, but even like the grittiness of it didn't feel gritty to me. Does that make sense? Like it was just bleak.
Yeah, no. I think that you're on the money with that.
I would have loved some sort of style to the grittiness, I think is what I'm trying to say.
Even if you look at Last Night in Soho, which is, depending on who you talk to, is not really well received. The technical aspects of that film are absolutely beautiful. Baby Driver is very distinct. Hot Fuzz and Scott Pilgrim of the World and, like The World's End, like they all kind of he has like a distinct visual style to him. This, The Running Man, like sure, some of like, the LED stuff was cool and stuff like, but it felt like a blockbuster that anybody could make, which is kind of disappointing. And unfortunately, I think this is, if you're not looking at like a Nolan or anything like that, like, or somebody like that, like with like Marvel films and a lot of blockbusters, everything seems kind of muted.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you look at like James Gunn's Superman example, he kind of overcorrects with color. Like it seems like, it's very colorful at the point. And The Running Man felt like a movie that anybody could make. Just very muted, very brown, sometimes visually interesting, very dark at points. Like just, like I beg, especially this year, it's for like directors and cinematographers to brighten some things up, like not everything has to be like Zack Snyder kind of moody. and like not a knock on him, because I think he's a great visual director, but he has like that like septed brown tone to his movies where everything is kind of brown.
Yeah, and it felt like with this, like when he goes to visit Molly to get his disguises and stuff, like that part of the movie did not feel any different than like his apartment or, the apartment that Daniel Ezra's character and his family live in, or, basically anything else. Like, even though those were clearly like very distinctly different areas, they all just kind of blended together. Like there was no distinction between them. And maybe that is part of the point. But you would think that even so, people would find a way to put a little bit more of their own personality within their own personal space. Like when we go into the room and Bradley is showing Ben the videos that he was making. That part I liked because the videos that he made had character to them, But then like this space, this hidden room that they were in kind of didn't. And I was like, this is just such a mismatch for me that you would think if he was doing this thing and had like this little secret room, it would feel more like the videos did. And it was unfortunate that all of that started to blend together. And even when he's in like the rich part of town and he's getting the hotel, even everything there looks very uniform. Like I noticed like every single person in the rich area of town, they all had on trench coats. Every single one of them.
The temple of rich people in that time is just trench coats and not fur suits, because they live in like the nice part of town, so they probably have nice weather and things like that. Not like the poor people.
Yeah, and I think I would have loved more of a distinction between the two places, because even though it's like clear that, oh, okay, this is like the rich part of town, it was still so bland. Like, I feel like it would have worked better if there was more of a contrast. And I know that a lot of this is nitpicking because, again, this is a dystopia. That's not necessarily how it works. But I think if you're going to have Edgar Wright as the director of this, you do have to let him put a certain flair on it that, like you said, we've seen with his other movies. And yeah, I'm so bummed that this didn't come together for me, because last year, 2025, was a pretty good year for Stephen King adaptations. And this was the one that really flopped in comparison to the others. And like, I know Life of Chuck didn't have like a super big theatrical release, but everyone I know who has seen that movie has liked it pretty well. So I was just really disappointed with this one. Even after rewatching it, I was like, it has its moments, but it just does not fully work.
Well, like, I think of like some of the directors and people who have worked on Stephen King adapts last year. Like, you know, you have Mike Flanagan, who did Life of Chuck. He's immersed in that Stephen King world where like the fantasy and fantastical elements of that small, short novel, like he captured, you know, like he captured kind of like the sadness and the magic of that story. Francis Lawrence, who did The Long Walk, he did all of the Hunger Games. Right? So that is his wheelhouse. So if you have like kids who are like damn near dying to continue walking for miles and miles on end, that's his thing. Andy Muschietti with It, you know, like, and working on that. Like, he did It 1 and Chapter 2. So, like, Welcome to Derry felt great. You know, like, Edgar Wright, like, it seems like he had kind of the right idea, but he also made a movie that anybody, like I said, like, anybody else could make. He didn't make, like, an Edgar Wright movie to me.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of like art. It's just, like, felt like it like traced the lines of things that we've already seen in like these like societies crumbling on films, but being very loyal to the book, which, you know, I give him credit for.
Yeah. So shall we talk about that ending though, since that's,
yeah, sure,
you know, the one thing that is a bit different. So we have Ben on the plane. He gets into it with Lee Pace's Hunter, and he has had his videos altered throughout this process. When he's talking to the camera, they're airing, you know, like AI altered versions, which that is a whole thing too. I think this is a movie that, while it is very relevant to the times, I don't know if it's something that necessarily like people are excited to go out and see during these times where things like that really are happening, where people are like spreading AI photos, AI generated videos, and just like spreading all of these lies. Like, that may have hit a little too close to home for a lot of people right now, but the ending, they change it so that Ben escapes in, you know, this supposedly this little escape pod that they have for the crew that you're not made aware of at all when you go through like how many bathrooms are on this plane, or like all of these other things that show you kind of like the layout of the plane. And he tracks down Killian when the next season of the show is starting. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so.
So this thing has to be like The Bachelor series or something, where it's just like one right after another, or Survivor. Maybe that's a more apt comparison. And we aren't really sure how much time has passed between him escaping and this next season starting, right?
Yeah, I think it says, by the next season. I'm not sure what the seasons are, if they immediately happen once, one after the other, but it says either the next season.
Yeah, because we know that by this point, Bobby has quit and wants nothing to do with Killian anymore. So he just walks off, and it's up to Killian to like introduce this next season, and that leaves him vulnerable because he's cocky and thinks that, Richards is dead. So he gets exactly what Richards said he was going to get, basically. And in the book, if I'm not mistaken, he just flies the plane into the building, right?
Yep.
And I wanted to get your opinion on this, since you are someone who lives in the Northeast. But do you feel like that is a scenario that a lot of filmmakers have stayed as far away from as possible since the events of 9/11, which this year will be the 25th anniversary of that? And while that is like a decent amount of time, I think it's still something that hits a lot of people a little too close to home. So do you feel like that is something that may have contributed to why the ending was changed?
I think it was part of it. I think we're at the point where people have made 9/11 jokes, like very scant 9/11 jokes, but it's still a sore subject given like how many people have lost people and are still with us,
Yeah.
I'm not sure how like the original ending in the book would have gone over with most of the public. Some people may have not, like been like, okay, like I get it. But I think like actually seeing the visual of a plane going into a building probably would have not been, I think that's still a sore spot.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably why they changed the ending. But unfortunately, it made the ending for this very scattershot and very like, okay, everything wrapped up in a bow. I mean, I know in the 80s one, they kind of did the same thing where Richards kind of gets the upper hand on Killian and like sends him down the chute and like leads the rebellion. But the problem is with this Ben Richards is that we don't really get a sense that he wants to be a face of the rebellion. He just wants to get medicine for his little daughter.
Yeah.
He's angry at kind of like the bureaucracy and kind of like the government of what they did to him and made him unemployable and basically what has happened to his fellow man. But the whole Richards Lives thing, like I never got the sense that that's what he wanted. Like he didn't want to be like this, like, like rebel Che Guevara, like revolutionary figure. He just had one goal in mind, and that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to get money for his family.
Yeah, I agree that it made the ending a little scattershot because at first I thought they were going to just leave it. Like it felt like the movie ended a couple different times, and I almost thought that they were just going to end it when Bradley's like, and he got out of this escape pod, and then cut there. But then it keeps going and you get the confrontation with Killian, which then, it kind of cuts and all you hear is the gunshot. You don't see what actually happened, which was an interesting choice to cut there because I feel like it also almost made it less impactful. Like it almost turned the ending into a joke.
Yeah. Yeah. The whole like, like this is actually what happened. And like,
haha, I got you. We're going to cut and not actually see it.
Yeah. It just felt like very like the themes of the movie are very heavy. Not to say that you can't have like a campy feel to them. Like I think naturally like Glenn Powell brings that to the role. It just felt like there was a lot of stake with what happened in the jet and the deep fakes and stuff like that. But then when like the unreleased recordings and the black box. It was just like, haha, like you said, like, well, everything turned out great anyway. Like, he didn't die, like, it's just, I don't know.
Yeah. And I think that contributes a lot to why this just didn't come fully together for me. Because, like, I've talked about on this podcast how Stephen King doesn't always nail the endings. And obviously, The Running Man was written years before 9/11 ever happened. So if you want bleak, like, that is one of King's bleakest endings. And there are so few movies that are willing to sort of give us those bleak endings. And in fact, the movie that I think does that best of the King adaptations is one that changed the ending to be even bleaker, and that's The Mist.
The Long Walk changed the ending too, but The Mist really, like, that one was really dark.
Yeah. But I think with The Long Walk, since you bring that up, it's still very impactful, that ending. This one didn't feel like it was quite as much, because in my mind, killing one person at the network does not stop the network.
Yeah, there's always, men behind the man. There's always somebody ready to take place.
Yeah, and it's just not something that has as much of a community impact. Like, people are going to be like, oh, this was like revenge, a vendetta, whatever. But if you take down the whole network building, that's just a different statement that comes across.
Yeah, and then I think there's also, like, the people are also, through their circumstances, are indoctrinated to be a part of it, right? Like, people are taking bets. People are, like, during this game, actively trying to find a contestant. There's obviously going to be, like, it's not, the thing is, like, it is not, like, as cut and dry as, like, well, the game is over and everybody is free. There's obviously going to be zealots that still want the game because the societal conditions are there. So, like, it's not just, I think that, like, in terms of, like, the book and flying the plane and killing Killian and into the network building, it's more of a symbolic act to, like, bring down the whole structure, which is why, like, the movie ending doesn't really hit as well, because like, we see the rebellion, like, bubbling up with, like, Richard's lives, right? Like, we kind of see it, but then for him to, like, kind of fake his death for a while, and then everything happens so like rapid and close succession. Like, it's almost unbelievable to think that everybody was on board with it.
Yeah, I think that with this movie, they clearly wanted to make a big statement with it, but they just didn't fully commit to making that statement, And so then it kind of starts to fall apart by the end. And yeah, man, I wish I liked this more. I wish it was better.
Yeah, I mean, like, it hits different when, like, you have ICE agents, like, terrorizing neighborhoods. Like, it's like, you see the hunters and stuff like that, and you're like, well, I'm kind of living in that, so.
Yeah, especially when you see what they did to Molly, and I don't have anything else to say about it. Do you have any final thoughts?
No, I think it's on Paramount Plus now, so you go see it if you didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just on a very high Stephen King year. It was kind of a low point for me, which is sad.
Yeah, and before we go, I do want to very quickly talk about what's next in the King adaptation world. It looks like there isn't anything with a confirmed date for this year, but my best guess is at some point we get a date for Mike Flanagan's Carrie series and maybe a season 2 of Welcome to Derry. Is there anything you've heard about that I might not have caught?
Well, I think Stephen King posted today about the second season of The Institute. That's on Starz. I think there's, like, movies in production and stuff like that, but nothing really concrete yet. It just felt like there was a wealth of Stephen King stuff last year, and then this year is just kind of, we get Carrie.
Yeah, it's either the obscure things, and is The Institute on Starz, or is it like one of those random MGM something or other.
Yeah, it's on MGM Plus.
Nobody that I talk to in my day-to-day life has seen or heard of this show.
Yeah. Well, it's renewed for a second season if you want to go seek it out. But I'm not sure how much MGM Plus costs.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those in-between things. Like maybe we get some announcements for like stuff that's in progress, like Billy Summers, I think, has been optioned, but I don't know if we know anyone who's attached to that.
Yeah, we don't even know right now if we're getting like a second season Welcome to Derry. I know that like it was a big like ratings win for Max and people really liked it. I thought it was really well done, but I think like, and the Machetes are like developing a story for it. So yeah, stay tuned.
Yeah. Well, Murjani, thank you for joining me to talk about The Running Man as our redo episode here.
Yeah, no problem. It's good to talk.